everybody, shall we start? We're going to have to compete a little bit with the band, so we will need to speak up, and especially if we're asking questions, we will need to speak up so the speakers can hear. Welcome to our food yurt. I'm Caroline Walker. Great pleasure to be chairing this session, and I'm going to ask our panellists to talk on the subject of how to get good food on the table. It's issues of accessibility, affordability and so on. And I'm going to ask each of the panellists to introduce themselves in turn. Then I've got a question for each of them in turn, and then we'll be opening up to your questions, so have some good questions ready. And as I say, we have a little competition we'll have to get over somehow. Project yourselves. Yeah, we're not joining in. We're not joining in with them. They'll have to join in with us. So, without more ado, because we've only got an hour, I'm going to ask Kate if she will introduce herself, and then we'll take it from there.
Hello everyone, my name is Kate Michelle, and I'm here on behalf of the NHS. I work down at the medical centre, up at Barton House and over at Lyme Regis Medical Centre in the social prescribing team. Now, social prescribing is quite a new innovation, started really in Frome, just up the road from us, and there's a requirement for all GP surgeries to have a social prescribing presence. So what we do, we're a non-clinical team, and we work on all the things that affect our health and well-being, but for which there often isn't an easy answer. Medication may not be the answer, and the GP certainly won't be able to solve in the 10 minutes he or she has when you're in the surgery. So taking care of ourselves is much more than just medicine. We cover things like social isolation and loneliness, chronic pain, emotional well-being, and that can be low mood and mild anxiety. We support around life-changing events such as bereavement, divorce, loss of confidence, purpose, healthy lifestyle choices, managing long-term conditions. We can even help a bit with housing and finance. All of these things, if they're not going well in our life, makes us unwell, but they're not a clinical problem necessarily. So I myself am really interested in supporting people to make healthier lifestyle choices. So that means what we're eating and drinking and what we're doing, how active we are. And I have a particular focus on helping with prevention of diabetes and supporting people who wish to lose weight, particularly. Now, I think we're all aware of the problems facing us with diabetes, obesity, these chronic long-term inflammatory conditions, often described as lifestyle diseases. And the NHS on the sharp end of this. We have this wave of poor health, and it's all going to land on the NHS's lap, and particularly primary care. So what we try to do is we try to empower the patient to take care of their own health. And this can go in a number of different ways. It often starts with a good chat with the patient about, tell me about it. Why do you want to, not why, but what do you want to do? You want to be losing weight maybe, or you feel you ought to be doing this. We have a really good conversation, and it allows the person to find out really what matters to them and what direction they want to go in. And then with that information, we can find a path to go forwards. A lot of what we do is signposting to local things going on, community events. If someone's socially isolated at home, we can find a group they might want to go to. We may take them to a support group or a coffee morning, what have you, anything like that, where they lack confidence to go on their own. But for me personally, when I look at food in Bridport, we're focusing on food today, what we eat is fundamentally so important to our long-term physical well-being and our mental well-being. We say mental health and physical health, and actually it's all a continuum. How we eat can affect how we feel, and how we feel can affect what we eat. So I start off with giving out information that the patient can then take away with and implement as they wish. I never tell people what you must be eating, because that never works. Because it has to come from the person. They have to engage and want to make some changes. But we talk about all easy ways that we can improve what we're eating. We start off with a bad diet, we add in some good things, chucking a tin of beans, maybe a handful of lentils. How about putting some veg, you know? I'll signpost them to sources of food in our community. So when people say, but I can't afford to eat healthily, and I know that's a big issue, budget, I'll often signpost to the glut or the community fridge where they can go and get free food. If necessary, you can refer them to a food bank. I give signposting to websites which give information, and I noticed Sue Becker's here, so when we're looking at diabetes, what I want them to do is to look at whole foods, solving their diabetes by eating proper healthy food rather than fad diets or quick fixes. So we're looking at long-term health changes. What also interests me is food as a social activity, and I think Rachel will be talking about this a bit. So the idea of how can we use food to socialise with people, get people connected back in their community. We have lots of places in Bridport where you can go and eat with people, meet new people. So that's another aspect to my work. And of course we signpost on and refer to psychological services and the health coaches work very closely with you from Health and Care, so to give longer term support. And as well as that, the food aspect of it, I try to encourage people to become more active. So physical activity is a health benefit. So that's really where I'm coming from. The NHS doesn't have a role necessarily in providing food, unless it's very specialist food for people who have very particular dietary needs. In fact, if you need to see a dietitian in the NHS, it would mean you have really very specific dietary needs. But what we do want to do is work really closely with our community to make sure our most deprived patients have access to good quality food, which will be beneficial for their health.
Thanks, that's great. Yeah. So thanks very much to Kate. So we're just a little bit over time, but that's absolutely fine. No, absolutely fine. And now I'm handing over to Rachel. Go ahead.
Okay, hi, I'm Rachel. I'm part of the Bridport Food Matters steering group, and I've got a particular interest in understanding and addressing the barriers to accessing good food. I'm the sort of person, when I was a child, I was the sort of child who'd say, but why? That'd be that really annoying child. And I'm really interested, having also studied psychology, in why we have this food environment and why people apparently make unhealthy choices. But also I'm interested in the way we see people and the way we make assumptions about people, and in terms of what they're eating, and whether they should. Sorry, I'm finding it really hard with the everybody else. I got terrible brain fog at the moment, and it's like really interfering. But why we tend to place the emphasis on the individual, because I'm overweight, as you can see, and you would probably assume it's because I eat really badly. I've been brought up with a really good diet and I grow loads of my vegetables and I eat really well, but I've got a chronic illness which contributes to that. That chronic illness probably came from exposure to pesticides, as we used to spray flea spray, which we got from the vet all around the house for years, and which damaged my immune system, I feel, from my symptoms. And also I had a virus for 3 months which made me sick. And after those two things had happened, I got fibromyalgia and I got gut problems, which have carried on to this day, despite all of my individual work and my work with the NHS. So I think there's a lot of assumptions made about if we just tell people this or that, the other, that they will be healthy. And right now we're ignoring a big aspect which affects our health and our ability to earn money to pay for good food, in this case, which is COVID. We have pretended it's all gone away when it hasn't gone away. It's a virus that does caused a lot of problems, and possibly my symptoms have been exacerbated by that. So why is that to do with food? That's to do with, can you afford good food? How are you able to eat well? And also the Food and Farming and Countryside Commission, who we were inspired by to do these conversations, have been going all around the country and asking people what their thoughts about food are, and from that they quite clearly demonstrated that people don't eat bad food because they think it's okay. People don't want ultra processed foods. It's to do with the structural problems in society that lead them to do that, and actually if people have the money or the ability to do it, they will eat well. But we're also in a culture which is pushing these things as normal to us as well. So I'm very interested in all of those things and how they all link up.
Thank you. Very good in time. Yes. Yeah. And finally, it's our third panellist, all the way from the South Hams,
Thank you.
David from Totnes.
Hello, everybody. I'm David. I'm a co-founder of a project called Food in Community, and we were established as a CIC in 2013. And our kind of remit is to increase the access of the best food available to as many people as possible. And the way we thought we could do that was by sourcing surplus produce, organic surplus produce. So when we started, taking this organic route was seen as a little bit fuddy-duddy and a little bit precious. But we're glad we stuck by that, because it's the way we wanted to eat. And a lot of the food that we gather goes towards more vulnerable people. So we kind of feel that the more vulnerable people particularly need the best food as well. So we source it from various places. So we go to the fields and glean. So we have relationships with farmers. And we do something called social gleaning. So we take members of the community, probably 50% of our volunteers are vulnerable in themselves, and we have a very relaxed volunteering policy. So people come out to organic fields, they're beautiful sites, the biodiversity is amazing, and it's a lovely experience, and there's no real pressure to gather the whole field. It's just what we need, really. We also have built up relationships with artisan bakers, cheese makers. I was going to say captains, yeah. Anyone that produces really good food that has surpluses, and I mean, there's an amazing resource out there, just there. I mean, and it helps them to actually, rather than throw it in the bin, to actually feel that they're putting it somewhere useful. And if we get a grant from the government, because there are a lot of grants to support food banks, whatever, and there's a whole thing about charity and food, and how actually as Food and Community we want to try and disassociate ourselves from charity or food as a charitable thing, and at the same time there is this enormous need. And 11 years ago, when we started, the emphasis really was on food waste, and we got involved with Devon County Council, represented them in Europe, talking about how we're getting this food waste in the fields, and it was all, yeah. But now you wouldn't think 11 years later actually that there is more demand for food than there was then. I find it incredible that we're still doing what we're doing. So we try and reciprocate, because a lot of these small businesses are having a hard time with the cost of living crisis. So if we get a grant, we buy from them, and we just got a grant for about £32,000, and that is a huge thing, a huge amount that you could spend within your community. So we also, I mean, we're very fortunate to have Riverfield Organic. I don't know if you've heard of them, but I mean, we're kind of smart because the project started through them, really. I was on a college course and I saw in a field crops lying unused, unwanted, and I asked the farmer why, and she said that it was uneconomical to do a second harvest. So I went to Guy Watson and asked him, can we come and glean in the field? Because the field was part of a Riverford co-op. And he said, well, and it was a wet, windy winter's day, and he said, well, I can save you all that hassle. Why don't you just come and get our grade out, which is, they do a box scheme, and it's the stuff that's too big or too small or not going to last the few days that it needs to go out to their customers. So we did that, and we were in a really cold, dark, hostile environment, a barn which had forklift trucks whizzing backwards and forwards. It was cold because it was air conditioned. Yeah, do you want me to stop?
In a minute.
And but so over the years we've developed a relationship with them, and we have we independently of them we have our own building, our own storeroom, and we have 2 vans, and we have part-time people. But it's all based on a system that we challenge. So it's getting that right is always the question.
Thanks. Well, I hope that's given you an idea of where our 3 panellists are coming from. Very different, but very, complementary approaches. I've just got a starter question for each of them, but I'm very happy, for you to jump in if you have a burning question you'd like to. But it must be a question, not a statement, if you wouldn't mind. So for Kate, I have a question about how she connects the social prescribing with food issues specifically. You've said a little bit about it, but if we could just hear a little bit more detail. And then what I really would like to know, in an ideal world, what would you do to make the best benefit to the people you work with around food issues? Okay?
So I did consider this. So, as I said earlier, it's not within the NHS remit to be involved in food production or distribution, apart from in very, very specific areas. So I think my role here in Bridport is to put my patients, and particularly those who are in the 20% most deprived deciles of our community, in touch with our fantastic local organisations that help with food. So that might be the Glut, it might be the community fridge, or the food bank, or the grown. Well, we dig no dig, but it's not called that.
No,
is it?
edible bread.
Yeah,
Edible group.
Yeah.
or the community allotment, or the cowshed, or any of these other organisations which are involved with food. That's the limit of what I, in my job, really can do with our community things. I can't give people food out of the GP surgery.
In an ideal world?
In an ideal world. So, well, I thought about this 2 ways. I thought national and local, because we always told, think global, act local, right? So nationally, we did a national food strategy which addresses some of the more egregious ultra-processed food problems of our agro-industrial complex. I think we all understand. So a lot of our things we say are structural, but in an ideal world, what I would like is for Bridport Town Council to go speak to Richard and find out where he got the money from.
Oh, David.
David, sorry.
Oh, where I got the money?
Yeah, where he got the money from.
What money?
The £32,000.
Oh, right.
And get a food coordinator, a paid position. So much of what we in social prescribing rely on are volunteers, and volunteers are limited. So get somebody who is paid to support our local groups, support us in the medical profession to connect with these groups, and I think that would be, in an ideal world, that was what we would do.
Yeah,
Does that sound all
That's a
right?
great answer. Thank you
Yeah,
very much.
and we'd have a
indeed.
kitchen as well.
Oh, yes.
Teaching kitchen.
Yes.
Yes. That was the thing I thought of
Kitchen.
Yeah, because that would help so much. So many people, they could produce cheap, nutritious, whole food, but they lack sometimes the knowledge and the education to do so. They just need some help to learn how to do that, and then they'll be away.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks. That's great. Thank you very much.
Well,
Now, I'm going to go to David for this next one, just because of the way the questions come out. We really want to know, what are the main ingredients necessary for the success of your initiative? Because if you look at the Food in Community website, although David's told me it's a bit out of date, it's a wonderful website with lots of really good pictures, resources and information on it. What are the main ingredients that you found necessary for the success of your initiative? What are the highlights and what hasn't worked so well?
Okay. Can I just
Please
try
do.
to remember your question before I forget?
Kate.
It's okay. The money came from a Devon-based funder,
Ah,
and we find that a community cafe is a very good way of connecting,
yeah.
and it's a good advertising medium. People come in and eat. So it's a good way of getting volunteers. So the grant that we got, that large grant, only £1,500 was for running costs.
Right.
And that is one of the biggest problems, is that funders will happily fund a project, probably a new one is what they like, but actually the more effective you become, the more overheads you start
Yeah, of course,
getting.
of course.
The insurances, the health and safety, the fans, the staff, and they just don't want to fund that side of things. So,
I think the thing is that we rely a lot on volunteers.
yeah.
And that's great, but sometimes to really drive things, you need to have people whose job it is
Yeah.
to do it. Yeah.
Well, and the two directors, I mean, we're paid very small amounts, but there's always the thought that one day it'll be recognised, or who knows, just time just goes. Right?
Okay. So some of your highlights?
But I think the highlight for me is that I was a photographer most of my life, and I didn't communicate with anyone else behind the lens and then in the darkroom, or behind the computer. So the community aspect is as important as the food. So the food is the catalyst in what isn't it? So the social interactions, the rewards from seeing that happen are brilliant. You rely on volunteers, but actually, for my part and my fellow director, you work very hard. And one of our problems is that we're not attracting enough of a salary for when we burn out or decide to leave to replace us. So it's very short. Yeah. So we just keep going until we can.
It's trying to get some resilience into that. Isn't it?
Yeah.
So, so what hasn't worked so well might
Well,
be
that,
the
I think-
reliance on volunteers.
What was over-reliance on
Yeah,
volunteers?
yeah.
You do need some expertise, and we're thinking of going down the social prescribing route because there are tenders as well. We do have a social prescriber that we pay a part-time wage to, who manages our client, our recipient boxes of people. But that's sorry.
I don't think we can be heard, can we? Speak out, David.
But
Sorry, talk to me.
we give boxes, we deliver them to the door of people that go through a process. Unfortunately, they have to be on benefits, and they have to have other factors now, because the criteria has had to get so strict, because there's so many people now that need assistance, and it's not food assistance, it's money, isn't it? It's help that way. And it could be in our area, it could be 1,500 people, but it's 150 at the moment. And we have volunteers doing that. We have the question was how it doesn't work.
Well, no, it was what are the highlights and what hasn't worked so well?
Well, the highlights is the good community, the celebration when we have clubs, we can celebrate with smiles on people's faces. I think it's a good celebration.
Could you say a tiny bit more about your community cafe?
Yeah, so the cafe is open to everybody. We pop up there, so we have to bring all the fruit and veg, most of the equipment, and we have to hike it there once a month. And it's a pay what you feel. It's a high street position, so we get a lot of footfall, and it's open to everybody. And it's on a pay what you feel, pay what you can kind of principle. So we used to just have a pot there and people would just do it and put money in, but we found that nobody actually put anything in, interestingly. So we actually have to sit here, and there are a few people that say, well, just put their change in, which is fine, and we don't judge that at all, but there is a slight awkwardness sometimes. But most people, if you write down why you charge, what the kind of charge should be and what it costs to make a meal, like we reckon it probably costs £7 to actually create it. People understand. Some people give £30, some people give £3, and we had to work very hard to get across that we use food surplus, but it used to be called waste food, and we were for years and years, right from the start, we told everybody this isn't waste food. This is a very positive resource.
So is there anything you've done that didn't work and you stopped?
I think we stopped due to lack of energy. So we had a cooking group for older widowed men, which became a lunch club where we cooked and they ate together. I kept them falling over, so we'd have 8 one week and then 2 the next, and we couldn't do that. But it was a really lovely thing to do.
Yeah.
We don't involve young people enough because the only people with time are retired or not well and unable to work, and which is great, but for its longevity we need younger people.
Right. That's a good point.
And we're fighting a system which I think if the fast food, if these manufacturers just like, I think it was it the Spanish, one of the food ministers or something, he said, if we could get the fast food processors, the ultra processed food manufacturers, just to improve them and make them of value, that would cure more or less everything at a stroke. So.
Thanks, David. And I mean that segues in beautifully, Rachel, to I'm sure what you want to talk about. And my question to Rachel is about what are the systemic barriers to getting good food on the table? How are we working in Bridport to address some of these? And I'll just let you get on that one, Rachel, because that's a great subject.
Everyone knows about the problems with the food system and all the lobbying that goes on behind the scenes, and the fact that politicians think very short term, and that there was a great national food strategy outlined by Henry Dimbleby, which has just been shelved by the government. So that is a massive problem, and they are still working and the Food and Farming and Countryside Commission, who I talked about earlier on, are actually going around the country in order to show that the government do need to embrace this, because actually people don't want that. It's a complete lie that people want terrible food. So there's lots of people working on that. Obviously I'm much more interested in what we can do locally, because obviously everybody, please do not vote for the Tories. Sorry to get political, but they have done so much damage to people, and the benefit system is crippling people. And on to that point, it's very interesting that recently the small farmers, the sustainable farmers, have now with families have been on tax credits, that system in the past, which has been actually pretty good for most people on that system if you're self-employed. And because they're now all being moved on to universal credit, it's a terrible system that is basically saying to them, well, you don't make enough money, so it's just a hobby. You have to get, you've got a year, and if you don't make enough money, and you don't make enough money for the hours you do in that sort of work, you're very lucky if you do. So it's very interesting at the moment that self-employed people have been screaming for years about this system, which is absolutely appalling. It does not work for self-employed people. It doesn't really work for people who are employed either, especially in the gig economy. That now people who are interested in local foods are waking up to the fact that it's terrible. So I think it's really important to understand that. And everyone thinks all benefits, that people shouldn't have to rely on benefits, but the thing is, it's built into the system that you have a vast swathe of people who will not make enough money in order to have certain people making a hell of a lot. That is the way it works. It's not really, you were saying you're slightly surprised about where we've got to.
Well, I'm not.
No, see, we're actually not surprised.
No.
So what can we do instead? We have to change the way we think about things. We have to stop actually thinking other people are going to feed us as well. You know, that's the other thing we expect. We expect food to be cheap for certain people. We sort of feel like that we could get enough wages up that people could afford good food, and we also feel that food should be cheap. Neither of those things are going to work anyway. So we need to be thinking about different systems which perhaps don't involve money. You know, we have the business side of things, but we also have perhaps the food banks and the things that, you know, everyone is doing in that sense, move into more of your sort of model where you're linking up the issues of food that gets wasted, and you're linking up volunteers, and you're linking up pay what you can, you know, and other people who can pay more, and we start shifting that view of how we operate as a society. I would like to see a basic income for everybody in this country, not just for small farmers. It's been proposed for those small farmers who are struggling at the moment. I think everybody should have that, because basically our rights to build, you know, live, all of the resources in nature have been taken away from us. We can't just go and build a house. We can't just go and keep some animals and cut some trees out, you know, whatever it is. You know, we can't survive in this country or in practically anywhere around the world of our own, you know, accord. So that is, we have to understand that is, when we say that individuals are responsible, individuals are in a particular environment which limits them, and we have to check our own privilege as well, and understand that it's a food environment. So what can we change? We can change locally. And obviously I'm involved in Bridport Food Festival, and we're trying to bring all of those things together. We're trying to bring people together so we can have a conversation about everything. We can be together in the same space by having a hub, so that we can solve those problems in our community and use everybody's energy and resources. Going back to volunteers, we were talking about volunteers, they're talking about volunteers. These things, like the food festival, this only runs because so many people volunteer. In fact, a lot of the year round. You know, we volunteer in Bridport Food Matters. The arts, you know, so many things that we love is due to not getting paid. You know, is us volunteering, and let alone what we do in our families in caring. So we need to understand that that's all going on. And also, in order for the whole conversation to happen across the community, we need to make that possible for everybody's voice to be heard. So the other thing I would like to see is conversations have like people's assemblies, so that we can bring every voice in. Because at the moment, we have select privileged, in many ways, you know, I'm not talking about just rich, but people who are lucky enough to be able to give their time, who are able to do these things. But then they filter what happens through their life experience. And that's why you end up with these little things that are like, well, people, I mean, I'm not undermining what you do at all, but people just need to learn how to cook or to budget, and then they'll be able to eat good food. It's not true.
I don't think we ever say that to anybody.
No, you're not saying. That's what I'm saying. You're not saying that. I know you're not saying that, but do you know what I mean? The bad side of it is
that goes to the whole sort of like, it's the fault of the person, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like victim shaming kind of thing. It's like, it's your own fault if you're unhealthy and you're fat.
Yeah.
But where are we situated? And so, how do we change the food environment? We change our. I believe, because we're doing. I'm inspired by Incredible Edible. We're doing Edible Bridport. We're trying to get beds of veg all around town, whether it's in public places and private places, so that we have food everywhere, so that you can supplement your diet with food, but also you learn about what seasonal food is by seeing it, or you can get involved. You might only have 10 minutes a week, but you can get involved and tend a very small area of land, because you know it's near where you live, and you know, people who perhaps are on the receiving end of food charity will be able to get involved and not feel like they are a lesser person because they are dependent on this. That we shift the landscape, and ultimately I would like to see the landscape shifted so that it's, you know, it's totally full of food for us to just harvest whenever we want to. That's
Right, well, that's great, and I'm just going to check our time. So we've 15 minutes left.
Okay.
So we've 15 minutes left, and in the last 15 minutes, it would be lovely if anybody, having heard these three presentations, has a question for the panel. Jit, I think I can start with you.
Thank you, Caroline. I'm really sorry to ask this question, because I can see that the three of you are fighting hard in the context of the situation, the unequal situation today. My question is, how will your models meet the food insecurity of the climate breakdown? We know that this in the UK, the amount of land planted for food production has gone down by between 15 to 25%, depending on the crop. We know that India, which has its own food basket for wheat and everything, has got a heat wave of 50 degrees, and laborers can't get out. Well, they get out to plant their crops and die.
Okay.
And that's the world over. So how can we, in Bridport, create that resilience you spoke about in the context of climate breakdown?
Okay, who wants to start with that? Rachel?
Sorry, I can't talk.
Briefly.
It can't. We're actually in for some massive problems. People have been suffering around the world, as you know, for forever. We're slightly sheltered at the moment, but we are really. It's a massive storm, but I feel what I'm trying to do. I'm well aware of that, and that's why I'm trying to get people growing everywhere, because I feel like sooner rather than later we're going to need to do World War II type growing everywhere. We're going to do that. And the thing about doing all these individual beds and people being involved is that what we could be doing is lots of people noticing what is adapting to the climate, citizen science going on all around the town, you know. So I do feel like it's not, we're not going to prevent terrible things coming. But this is the other reason why I want everybody to be able to have a voice in Bridport, because at the moment it's not true. It's not like that. People are really kind to do great stuff for people, but but it's still doing to people.
They're doing
so.
things.
Yeah. David, what about issues in Totnes? Because I know Totnes has been in the front of climate action for a long time.
Well, it's so complex, isn't it? So complicated, and we have to see things in circles, and everything's connected. And that talk before with the farmers,
Yeah.
I think, and if we want good food, I think organic growth is something like 3% of, it's nothing. So it's a slow process, and one solution might be, and you were kind of referring to the World War kind of mentality, and during that period we had community cafes, and they were quite pleasant places apparently, tablecloths and subsidised meals, waiting service, and actually eating together is a very economical way of making food stretch. So I think maybe that as and getting community, but how we get farmers growing more when the average age is 58, and how we get young people in when there's no land, they can't afford the land. Right? Also huge questions. So, yeah. But we have to start somewhere, and actually the benefit of a community and a local community organisation is that you can feel held, and you can feel you're making a difference, and that's all you can do, I think.
Can I say, one of the things when we're looking at these massive changes and potential food shortages because of harvest failure is we have to look at how we eat. And I think it's fair to say that if we talk about the West, and I think of sort of like Europe and America and Canada, Australia, everything, we eat a very luxurious diet. We have a wide range of foods we can access year round. We eat very large quantities of meat, and I think we seriously have to look at how we are eating. We need to eat more like poor peasant people if we are to make the food that we will have going forward go around the world.
But isn't it also interesting? I always think this about peasant food is that when we're lucky.
It's also very good for you.
Well, yeah, but when we're lucky enough to go travelling, what is it that the dishes of those countries that we love? It's peasant food, so it's not like we sort of think.
Oh, it's not a deprivation.
Yeah, it's not a deprivation.
But if we actually look
at
how
we need to celebrate that.
produce our food, and what we eat and what we have learned to expect as a routine part of our diet, I think if we want our food that we've got globally to go round, we absolutely have to change how we eat, and we just have to like beans a whole lot more than we do. Right?
Beans are great.
I love beans personally.
So shout out for beans. Does anybody have a question? Anybody want to come up with another question? Good question there.
Can I say
Yes,
something?
of course.
I mean, I absolutely agree with what Rachel says about growing food everywhere. Well, a few months ago, I put out that we have space in our garden that we want people to grow, and I got no response.
Right.
Which is really frustrating, because we've got areas in our garden, there's 2 areas that we want to actually put over to growing
I'm sorry, go
vegetables.
on.
Yes,
I would love it if a couple of people said, can I have one of your
Okay.
patches? So I got no response.
So did you want
Yes.
to respond to that? Thank you.
It was tried in Totnes where we are, and the problem was, I think, that people wanted to volunteer and they put a lot of effort, could put a lot of effort into it, but there's no security of tenure really. So it might be that the person sells their house the next year, and so the fruits of that labour. So how do you get some sort of reciprocal thing going on? You know?
Yes, that's a good point.
The other thing is the reason for the beds all around town is that, I know if you have to go 15 minutes walk to your allotment, you get a lot less done than if it's just where I am. Really lucky it's right out the back of my house. So I think that's an issue as well, that people's lives are so busy, and it's also hard, just like you were saying about having a pop-up kitchen. I'm filming horror because we've done that, but having to take all the tools and things and other things. So maybe you just need to sell it as it's all in place, you get it for this length of time, I'll water in between. So maybe it's just the way, because I think everyone's got so much on and are so knackered. Well, they've understood about me, but that it's hard to do that, to be able to go, So I could help you advertise it if you want.
Oh, thanks for that. Yes.
David, how do you get around a potential problem? I've got what Liz just said, where you're delivering fresh produce to people and they're going,
What do I do with
this?
Yeah, and
It's
it's
actually a huge education mission.
Well,
How does that?
no. Well,
that's
we come
start?
take the view that people do know how to cook, and actually, if they don't, most people can look on the internet. It's not, most young people, they can do it in an instant, and you can follow a recipe easy enough. But it's more time resource, I think. And actually, if your mental health isn't good, you just don't want to look at our box of veg, and it is a barrier. And we know it's not the solution, but it is for a lot of people, and that's the best we can do at the moment. So we could clean it, cut it, and prep it, and that's probably something we're thinking about to make it more accessible. But
And then over time, send less prepared stuff. So that
well, who knows?
I think so in my experience at work, when I speak to people about dietary changes or whatever, the 2 things that are mentioned most of all is cost and time. People know how to cook oftentimes, right?
Yeah.
But I don't have time, or I come, I work, I've got kids, I come home, and then I have to make dinner. Is another, and typically with families, you've got both parents working, maybe children. That's the way we're set up at the moment for everything. People are really time poor, so anything you can do to. I went to a meeting recently, and they'd had an initiative over Poolway, and they'd done some education around slow cookers, and they'd had a bunch of. In fact, they'd been again targeted through the GP surgeries as being in the most deprived deciles, and risk, various risk factors. Taught them about using a slow cooker. So basically, you bung everything in the morning, you put the lid on, you go to work, come back, got dinner. And they also got given a slow cooker. Here's your family-size slow cooker, a hot crock pot type thing. And the lady who was telling us about it said, for many of those families, it was absolutely transformative, because it meant the time spent cooking and prepping food was minimised. the work of the cooking was done during the day, and then there was like proper nutritious whole food that they could eat. So it just made a massive difference to those families. Just a very, very simple thing like this. So if we had our kitchen, that's one of the courses we could do.
It's a big step up to. Then you've got to think about discoloration and
of course.
longevity of it.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of forcing people into actually using it or wasting it. And most of the waste that goes on is in the home now. So we have.
But on it, I mean, if you could even get it, that I think was it mentioned here or somewhere outside that if the food that was available was just slightly better quality in the supermarkets or whatever, the really quick and easy to eat stuff, you can buy. If that was even upgraded to being not quite as atrocious as it is at the moment, then that would just be a step in the right direction. So if you had some sort of legislation or some sort of mechanism by which minimum food standards could be applied, it wasn't just minimum hygiene but actually minimum nutritionally good food, that would be enormously helpful. So at least people could then trust that what they're eating is good for them, right? But again, that's structural. I can't do anything about that here at Bridport.
No.
So I think we've got about 3 minutes left. Candida, will you come in?
Try to make it a question, because so perhaps Rachel would like to talk about would you like to talk about what our ideas are for a community food hub?
Yes, please. So shall we give a shout out? Shall we give a shout out to the
and that
Food
relates
Security
to
Club?
Chip's question about climate and food. So.
I was trying to remember everything, even though I've written endless things about it. Yeah, sorry. Right, so Canada's going to have to help me. But we as Bridport Food Matters, really want to have a physical space. We've been been doing things virtually and pop-up things for a long time. But we just know that if we get people in the same space, our energy, the work that we do, and the communication between these different projects will be so much more efficiently spent. But obviously, we want to have a space so we can have a lot of what you're doing and all of what you're doing as well, and like having this pay what you can cafe, but having a permanent space.
Yeah, well, that would be
and
good.
have seed, what do they call the business, so seeding businesses, doing their little incubation, thank you, incubation kitchens. Come on, Cancer, tell me all the other things because I can't remember.
Yeah, so it would have an incubation kitchen for supporting small businesses who are maybe doing their nice healthy ready meals, and so you can have a kitchen that could ideally be used as well for workshops. And educational events, skills sharing events. There are an awful lot of people in Britain who can share those skills.
Food preservation.
Yes, how do you preserve, how do you extend, how do you work on a budget and have the healthy food? How do you increase the supply? So the food security plan gives that idea of the farmers in transition producing more healthy food for the local market. How do you then, so your cafe would use food that's being supplied locally, low food miles, healthy, seasonal, and all the rest of it, and from initiatives like Chet and Lucy, who've got 16 acres just outside Bridport doing climate adaptive growing. So it all then begins to come together, this whole idea. And we need to build, we've got quite a few partnerships and collaborations to do these kind of conversations. But we need, so our main desire at the moment in terms of extending our partnership is with the NHS and particularly so the prescribing team, and how we can do what they've done as well in Froome, which is Green Healthy Froome, which is actually putting equity and health and climate all together on the same stage. So that's our ambition. We need people constantly having these conversations. We're getting people involved. Go to the next door tent list, build your own community food hub, where you can put your ideas as to what you want in it and take a photograph and give us that feedback and get involved. So I didn't want to give
No, it's great because I'm
Thank you. Well, we have sort of come to the end of our time, although I can see probably you won't want to go outside at the moment. So perhaps forecast. If I sort of just wrap up the formal part of the proceedings, and maybe we can just sit around and chat. But to thank very much each of our panelists, thank you for the questions, and thank Candida for all her coordination and food security work. Thanks everyone.